What's one interview you walked out of knowing you wouldn't get the job? I have had a number of job interviews recently that went poorly and did not result in securing employment. I started to think I needed to do something during an interview to really stand out, be impressive, unique, and highly memorable. I thought it could be risky, but might work out. I came up with the following idea. After concluding the next interview and shaking hands, I start leaving the room. Then before coming up to the door, I would stop, turn around and say, "There's one more thing you need to know about me." Then pull out a bottle of hot sauce, down the entire bottle, slam it onto the ground and say, "I can handle the heat." I would nod confidently and then leave the room. Boom. I imagined that they would be really impressed and wowed by such a performance. So the day came and it didn't pan out like I thought it would. It was only a small bottle of hot sauce, so I figured it would be no big deal to actually down. I should have tested the theory at home first, but I didn't. I was a nervous wreck during the interview. The interviewers had a very serious demeanor and a piercing gaze that made it difficult for me to concentrate on the questions they were asking. The room was uncomfortably warm and beads of sweat formed on my forehead, causing my glasses to slide down my nose. My hands were shaking and my stomach started feeling really gassy for some reason. "So tell me about a time when you had to handle a difficult situation at work," one of the interviewers asked, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. I stammered, trying to recall the rehearsed answer I had prepared. Just as I began to speak, my stomach let out a loud, embarrassing growl. Then I farted. Not just a small toot, but like one of those farts that could be confused for something much worse. If I had to compare the putrid smell, I would put it up there in my top 3 and say that the UN would have declared it a war crime had it been used in battle. The tiny room suddenly turned into a burial ground and the smell wasn't going anywhere. The sound echoed in the small room and we stared at each other in silence for what had to be the longest 20 seconds of my life. Eventually I tried to brush it off and pretend like nothing happened. Well, there was this one time when I, had to deal with a, difficult client. I managed to say, my voice cracking. I went on and tried to make up for the heinous act I just committed, but at that point it was an uphill battle. Regardless, I was determined to follow through with the plan. So at the end of the interview, I started exactly as described before. I was leaving and I turned around right before the door, maybe with not as much swagger as I'd imagined in my head. I declared, "There's one more thing you need to know about me." I pulled out the hot sauce bottle, almost dropped it and started to open the bottle. In my head, it was all one quick confident motion, like an electric Indiana Jones, but instead I fumbled around and had a tough time getting it open. It felt like a nightmare as eternity, but was probably only about 20 seconds. Enough time for one of the interviewers to ask me what I was doing. I didn't answer directly. Instead, after I got the bottle open, I repeated, "There's one more thing you need to know about me." Then I guzzled down the entire bottle of hot sauce. I instantly regretted it. My mouth and throat felt like lava was swirling around inside me. I immediately started to gag and loudly cough. I was crying involuntarily. Tears hardcore streaming down my face. I was sweating even more than before, like a terrible fool. I desperately tried to scream, "I can handle the heat," but just kept coughing before I could get anything out. The interviewers were all standing up looking at me in horror and confusion. A few seconds before I threw up all over the floor. I knew it would happen, but I tried to hold it back. I couldn't. I threw up all over the floor. It hurt as much on the way out as it did on the way in, if not more so. The vomit felt like flaming barbed wire shredding its way through my neck. I should mention a disturbing amount of fiery mucus was also leaking out of my nose uncontrollably. After I finished throwing up, I could not bear to look at the interviewers. I hoarsely mumbled an apology and started to stumble as quickly as possible out the door. I had never been more ashamed in my life. Safe to say, I don't think they'll be calling me back anytime soon. Thanks for watching.